Hello, Georgia.
Hi, how are you?
How are you? Very
Yeah, very
good.
good.
Oh, wow, this has been coming for a bit, but it's quite exciting.
Yeah.
Sustainability, big thing. But tell
Mhm.
us a bit about you, Georgia. I know from a long time back from any viewers jumping on now and anyone watching it back, but any viewers coming on now, do pop your questions through in the comments because we aren't running this as an official agenda at all. We're just winging it.
Well, you might be, Guy.
Just go rolling.
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
it's good. But yeah,
Yeah.
Georgia, tell us a bit about where you came from and where you've got to.
So my name's Georgia Elliott-Smith, as you can see. I am the managing director and founder of Element 4, which is a sustainability and wellbeing consultancy. We work mainly in the property and construction industry, but also do some corporate sustainability strategy work as well for clients in other sectors. And yeah, we do all things groovy. So we do the well building standard, we do fit well, we do lots of lovely staff well-being, community engagement type work. But my background is I'm an environmental engineer, and I was one of the first environment managers in the UK construction industry way back 25 years ago. And so my whole background is in sustainable construction, sustainable property, and trying to do everything we can to minimize environmental impact. So that's where my heart is, and that's what we do.
Brilliant. And yeah, Guy Stanley at Stansons, and we do blinds and curtains and acoustics specifically for the office fit out market, design and office fit out. And sustainability is important for us, and how we can really are plugging it is working with designers to ensure that the shading, the curtains are a sustainable option, but a viably sustainable option, if that makes sense. It's not just a geeky thing for someone special, it's for everybody.
Yeah, we were just talking about this, weren't we? Like
Yeah.
making the products accessible and not niche and kind of luxury, only a few people can reach them. And I think that's one of the really key principles for me about sustainability, is that this has to apply to everybody. It's not just something that is for really elite projects that can afford something super expensive. True sustainability means it's got to be part of business as usual, otherwise it's meaningless. You know, it's only ever this tiny little niche.
Yeah, and it's just like, and it's much wider than just business as well. It's our whole life. It's every area that we touch, isn't it? But
Yeah.
how we impact it is through business. But yeah, it's sustainability. I think it is. I think the movement is changing. People's mindset is changing, but it's in the past been a bit of a speciality, hasn't it? Which
Yeah, and I think that's a shame. So a lot of what I do in my work is taking sustainability away from the experts and making it everybody's job. So we're not, you know, a lot of the problem with sustainability, particularly in construction and in design, is that it tends to be, you know, you do your normal day-to-day work and then you stop that and then you think about sustainability. And that to me is a complete nonsense. You know, what we need to be doing is changing the way that we do business. So changing fundamentally the way that people do things. So they're not doing more, they're doing their job in a more sustainable way. And therefore it becomes everybody's, a part of everybody's job is making sure that the tasks that they're doing and the decisions they're making are making that organization or that project or that product a better solution for the longer term. And that's, you know, financially, socially and environmentally, which is why I love systems change rather than just like bolting on a little niche, you know, look at me, you know, fancy innovation, but more about fundamentally questioning the way that we're doing our business and assessing the products as well that come across our desks, you know, because there are so many products out there that claim to be green. And I think it's really hard if you're thinking about sustainability as being something separate from what you do. If you're not educating yourself, if it's not part of the way you make decisions, it's really hard to be able to distinguish between what's just a green claim and green wash and what is a genuinely sustainable product that meets your objectives.
you nailed it.
Done. Yeah. Get a cup of tea. Is that it?
Yeah, done. Right, on to the next thing. But yeah, let's cover, what do we mean by a sustainable workplace? I know we can cover a huge, great big realm, but from the workplace and for the workplace designers on here, what let's cover off just what do we mean by that, Georgia? Tell us.
So when I think about a sustainable workplace, I think about one where we've looked at all of our impacts in a holistic way. So not just looking at quick fixes, like, you know, we've done this one thing and therefore we can put that on the brochure and we can shout about it and it's amazing. That is not sustainable. What we need to be looking at is from the outset bringing a real sustainable mentality to this project. So looking at its whole life impacts. And it's very easy, you know, some elements of sustainability are much easier to look at and to quantify than others, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't look at them. And so the RICS came up with a methodology for looking at whole life carbon in property, and it's a really, really good methodology, and it breaks down the elements of a building. So you can apply it to, you know, a whole building, you can apply it to a commercial fit out, you can apply it to all different types of projects, but that enables you to look at like a 60-year life of a project and look at how your embodied carbon and your operational carbon stacks up. And getting visibility on where your biggest impacts are, I think, is really important from the outset, because then you can, instead of just going for like little initiatives that might cost a lot of money and don't really have a massive impact over the life of a project, you might get visibility on something that was quite surprising and you think, oh, actually, that's something we can really look at and has a material impact on the way that we're going to design this project. So what was really surprising for me when we start doing whole life assessments of projects is that the embodied carbon, so that is the impact of the materials that you're putting into a building, over a longer lifespan have a massive impact. They're about 50% of the carbon emissions related to a building are to do with the stuff that goes into it, not the operational carbon, which is your heating, lighting, you know, small power, all of that stuff. So, you know, interior designers have a massive part to play in that with the products that they're specifying, and looking at where has the product come from, how has it been produced, you know, what are the materials that have gone into it, and looking at the high volume stuff as well as looking at smaller niche products, and really thinking about, you know, durability, longevity, classic design principles, rather than going down, you know, very fast turnover, niche, you know, trendy right now and then have to be replaced in 2 years, you know.
Yeah.
Really looking at those as a whole and coming up with an answer that has a material impact on the environmental properties of that whole project, not just going for like knee-jerk, sexy, you know, short-term solutions. Does that answer your question? That's very complicated. You probably just wanted like a do this one thing and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I wanted a 3-point checklist, Georgia.
Oh God!
I know that's the worst thing. I know.
I think like fundamentally the thing about sustainability is everybody just wants a quick answer.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that is part of the problem, is that if you're just looking for a quick one solution fits all, you're kind of missing the point. Because if we're going to create a more sustainable economy, a more sustainable society, we all need to educate ourselves on the things that really matter and how we can genuinely make an impact. And that is not by just finding like this one sexy answer, you know, that's got loads of greenwash claims. It's by doing our homework. It's by asking difficult questions. It's by collecting information and evolving that information over one project to the next and working out what worked on the last, how has understanding moved on, and kind of getting comfortable with the complexity of the subject, because it's not an easy subject. It is difficult, it's complex, it's got lots of different facets. And I think being honest about progress is so, so important, because greenwash is such a a cancer when it comes to genuine sustainability. You know, this trying to make every project look like it's really environmentally friendly when it's not, is such a blocker to us genuinely moving forward with solutions and finding good solutions. You know, we need to be honest about where we are on this journey and collect data, share that with other people in industry, participate in pilot projects, and expose what we're doing really well against what we're not doing so well, and what we understand and what we don't understand, and kind of all go along on that journey together and share our experiences. That's the kind of future that I want to see in a sustainable workplace, is much more honesty, not saying we've got it right and our building's perfect, but this is where we are on our journey. These things we did great, these things we couldn't fit into our budget, our time scale, you know, and so we're going to use our influence to try and change that and work on a solution.
Yeah, and it's almost just like standard business processes, isn't it? That we can design in to a sustainable workplace. It's not a sustainable department that sorts everything out. It's just like when you're looking at your figures at the end of the month or that type of thing, you're very honest with yourself. This is where we are. This is what we've hit. This is where we need to get to. This is a shortfall or whatever. It's just like that, but it's in sustainability. It's no change just because it's sustainability. It's the run of the mill. And I think that designers can have a really big impact in that, from we all know how important design is from the point of view of productivity and collaboration and creativity, and to make people actually think sustainability and have sustainable initiatives in the workplaces and have things that bring sustainability to forefront of mind. And even if people's little tiny actions, and we find actually that a lot of public are publicly in their personal lives are very strong on sustainability. It's then bringing that into being able to do it in the workplace, because you need it's like you need the IT to work agile, you need the setup to be sustainable, don't you? And lots of people will toe the line.
Yeah, you do. And I think this is something about corporate sustainability that, you know, that I'm working hard to try and address, is that, you know, it has to come from the top. There absolutely has to be an emphasis from leadership to say this is important, and we want everybody involved in helping find solutions, and creating a culture where it's okay to be honest about progress, and you don't feel like you know, if you're honest about what you're doing and you're honest about the decisions you've made, environment versus budget, you know, because sometimes it does come down to that. Sometimes sustainable solutions are more expensive, or sometimes a solution that you thought was more sustainable turns out actually to not be as sustainable as we thought it was, as science evolves and understanding evolves. But having a leadership structure and a management structure that is comfortable with imperfection and comfortable with progress and evolving understanding, and helping people to experiment with solutions and participate in these sorts of conversations, rather than just having you must meet this KPI, and if you haven't met it, then you don't get your pat on your back and your Christmas dinner. And I think that you know, and I think that is a real blocker to innovation. It's that lovely Google phrase, I think it's Google, the fail fast culture, of like trying things out, not being afraid to fail, but experimenting and understanding that when you're experimenting, when you're working in a very fast moving environment where things are changing a lot, scientific understanding moves along really fast in the field of sustainability, that it's okay to experiment, and some of those experiments are going to end up in failure, but that is part of the learning curve, that's part of the evolution, and that it's only by trying those things that you then move on to the next solution, as long as it's part of a proper system of like feedback loops. So you try it, you learn from it, you capture those lessons, you feed it back into the teams, you talk about it in a accusational way, in a non-blaming way, everybody learns, and then you try the next thing, and it's part of a proper structure of learning lessons.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. If anyone watching wants to ask any questions, then pop them in. We will get them over to Georgia. But, in the meantime, how can we design spaces to be energy and water efficient? I know you touched on it, the small points aren't necessarily a huge part of it, but
yeah,
if that's something that's part of our culture and ongoing, we would expect that to be included in the design, wouldn't we? So
yeah.
any thoughts on that, Georgia?
On water and energy, yeah. So I mean, there's so many things you can do, and I think one of those things is collecting really good data. So there's loads of great steering groups and working bodies and information going on in industry at the moment. So there are things like Better Buildings Partnership. They've got a great scheme called Design for Performance that's going on at the moment. They're producing lots of data, lots of methodology about how to close what we know as the performance gap. So at the outset of a project, you'll get an EPC, you'll do your SAP modelling, but that's all theoretical. You know what your theoretical energy performance will be for a building. What we're really bad at doing as an industry is then going back post-occupation and collecting data on how the building's actually performing. And it's a shame because we've been talking about it for decades. You know, this trying to go back, get really robust post-occupancy data on how the building's performing and then feeding that back into industry. So the Better Buildings Partnership Design for Performance scheme is part of their recommendations is about really good sub-metering strategies so that you can start putting in a really good set of monitors, so you know you're comparing apples with apples across industry. You can get really good data on how your building's performing and then feed that data back into industry to create great benchmarks. So this is one way that, for example, you don't necessarily need your building to be particularly energy efficient or particularly innovative, but simply by collecting really robust data, you can be part of the sustainability story because you're getting great quality data that you can then feed back into industry to help others design using that data. And I think, you know, in terms of post-occupancy evaluation, doing 3 stages, so doing one at the sort of post-construction stage, one at so one pre-construction, so your design modelling, doing one at post-construction stage, and then doing one a year later, and that is part of a soft landings sort of methodology. So, you know, something else that I really recommend is soft landings, which is run by BISRIA. It's a really great model for making sure that you're closing that performance gap and that you're really inducting people into the building in a really effective way, because we all know of those office spaces that look amazing and they've been designed with all the whistles and bells and super energy and water efficiency and all these great gadgets and things, but then you just take a load of people that were working in their 1990s office and you stick them in this new space, and they just transfer their old behaviour into this amazing new space, and nobody's really taught them how to use the space and how to engage with it properly. And that can be one of the biggest killers for energy and water efficiency, is that people just don't know how to use this space effectively. So really good building inductions, and not just the once but regularly, you know, keeping people trained up, having really user-friendly controls. You know, you'll probably be familiar with walking into a meeting room and you've got a switch on the wall that's got like switches numbered 1, 2, 3, 4 and maybe a dial or 2 on it, but with no labels. So the user has to kind of stand there fiddling with all the controls. They don't know, does the dial mean heating? Is it cooling? Am I going up? Am I going down? I don't know what it is. And so you end up with very, very smart technology, but, you know, I speak for myself, very dumb users, you know, who simply don't know what the controls are for. And I also think in buildings, because of the way that facilities management and operations has worked over the years, users have got this learned helplessness in buildings. So they don't know what they can touch. They kind of expect other people to operate the building around them. So blinds is one of my things that I always talk to users about. You have this scenario where on a Monday morning, you know, the sun's coming blazing in, everybody shuts the blinds, and then you'll find that on Friday afternoon all the blinds are still shut because on Monday it was sunny. And I think that's a really fascinating behaviour of people in offices, where they then sit in the dark, you know, and you then got all the lights on because you've got your daylight sensors in the lighting, very clever tech, you know, to make sure that the lighting is adjusted. So your lights are on full, your blinds are down, and it's a beautiful day outside. But nobody's really told the staff that they can interact, and it's their responsibility to open the blinds and to work with their facilities. And that's just one example. You know, AV, I could go on forever about AV and things like that, but you know, getting the users to a place where they're really comfortable interacting with their own space and they know what they can and can't do.
Yeah, and I think also some of it, like we're working on some projects, is also about taking the need of user input away. So it's, if the sun's out, the blinds automatically drop. And it's not, people sometimes they hear, I want motorization, so it's more energy efficient. Well, it still does depend on a user. So if you have sun sensors that then automatically command the blinds to drop depending on sunlight levels, and you aren't letting the heat in to then artificially cool it with air conditioning. And it's like, but that's just blinds. There's so much smart tech around lighting and motion sensors, and there's so much, isn't it, that a building can do. But it's to have that thought through, and I think it's bringing people in early. I think so often we want to sort of deal with the bigger things or the more glamorous developments, whereas something like, I don't know, well, blinds or lighting, it's not necessarily a deal from a design statement, but actually from a building, the cost of running the building going forward and the sustainable and impact and the carbon footprint on the, it's so important, isn't it? But it's because a great big la-di-da thing hanging from the ceiling, it just gets forgotten about.
We do, I mean, it's funny, we do, I think that the idea of thinking about the whole building rather than just individual elements is so important, because you know it makes you think early on about more of a strategy around sustainability for this building rather than just individual, you know, sexy little gadgets and things, but how it all joins up and meets the user's needs. And in that sense, you're absolutely right. You do need to think about a lot of things much earlier than you otherwise would. So your blinds or, you know, whatever finishing elements you might have could have a really significant impact on the way that people live within that space. You know, having, whether it's a manual or motorized, you know, fits with different strategies for different buildings. I just think that you need to give it some thought early on, even if it's a relatively high level, and then get into the detail later. But I'm all about, you know, don't just go for the one thing, the one product or the one innovation that you think is going to make your project sustainable. It's not. It is, sadly, a little bit more complicated than that, and requires an early planning around the sustainability principles that you're going to build into your project and where you can have the biggest impact.
That's brilliant. And I think it's so, it's quite easy to do. It's not necessarily hard. It just takes forethought. Is that taking your job away?
I am the forethought. That's it. This is exactly what I do with clients. So you know, this is, everybody's got their job to do, you know, and I think that I kind of sympathize with clients and designers as well, because so many people are coming to them with this, you know, incredible product that ticks all of the boxes, and you put this in and you'll have a super duper green building, and they're not experts in this field. And there is, so, you know, like I've already said, there's so much complexity. The science moves on very quickly. What might have been considered environmentally friendly a couple of years ago when you did another similar project, these days is frowned upon, you know, and the science moves on. And I think that's something about the discipline that we have to get comfortable with, is that our understanding changes. And so you can't beat yourself up about that. You know, I love science, but the very nature of science is that it changes, you know, so we do need to just keep on top of it. And the value of having a sustainability champion, which is how we operate on our projects, is that we're on top of all of that stuff, and we can take a look holistically at the project and say, right, this is a fantastic project, you know, fantastic product, and we wholly recommend it, and it fits within your scheme. But we've set out the principles of what it is that we're trying to achieve. So what one client's sustainability strategy will be very different from another client. So there, I don't advise that one size fits all for client sustainability strategies. You know, when we're looking at sustainability, it covers a huge range of topics, like, you know, modern slavery, ethical procurement. You might be looking at, you know, in particular at waste management and circular economy principles. You could be looking at embodied carbon, you know, operational carbon. There are so many things. And I don't believe that a robust strategy covers all of that. I think you have to focus in on the things that are really important to you as an organisation. Get to a point where you're acing that, and then move on to other things, and have that as part of a long-term strategy where you're knocking down the dominoes one at a time, rather than trying to spread your effort across everything. And then you end up as an organisation with a million KPIs that just blows everybody's minds. Then it does become something that belongs to a sustainability department, and other people are just going, oh, this is too complicated, I can't deal with it. So if your organisation, you know, is in a particular sector where potentially, you know, if you use a lot of timber, or you use a lot of stone product, or you are in a particular charity sector, or there's something that really chimes with your people and you think that will really win hearts and minds, then I would say that's got to be something that's central to your sustainability strategy, so that your staff can really get on board with it and get excited about it. You know, for some people, embodied carbon, they're like, oh, yeah, whatever, you know. They're not going to be leaping out of bed in the morning going, yeah, I'm doing something really great for the planet. There could be something else that you make central to your story. And I think you do need to tick off those key items, but there's ways of doing it that really get people's buy-in and get them excited, rather than just making it a whole raft of very dull grey KPIs that everybody switches off from because it's just too much to take in. And I think circular economy principles are one of those things that can get people really excited. It doesn't sound exciting, but you know, like ocean plastics, you know, we were talking about this before, yeah. And I think that's something that's really emotive, and really people really get that. And the circular economy is about diverting materials that otherwise would have been wasted out of the waste stream and making them usable again. And that's, you know, that starts with avoiding waste in the first place, which is a massive topic for me.
Yeah, well, that's actually brilliant. That brings us on nicely to our next point. But obviously, if anyone's got any questions, then chuck them in. We'd love to hear them as always. But yeah, how can we reduce, recycle, and reuse waste? I suppose the best way. And in it, I suppose, seeing as you said it, not to be dull, but in an exciting way, a way that, yeah, brings people's buy-in. But I do think, as you touched on, it's almost one of the easiest things to do, because people have got that emotional attachment, and it's very graphic, isn't it? Sort of shopping trolleys floating down the Thames and bottles and things. It's a very graphic image you can build up, and you can help clean the environment, and these beaches full of bottles after bank holidays. Yeah. And it's sight pollution more than anything, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? For us. And so it's very dramatic and very easy to buy into that whole emotional story and part of that clean up plan as such.
Yeah,
we bring that into our workplace design in an exciting way.
The thing is, it's funny you say that. Like, I think that waste is something, you know, I'm a super geek on the environment. I think waste is really exciting. And I think it is something that people can get really emotive, you know, it's an emotive subject, and it's something that you can visualize and say, you know, that kind of waste pollution, littering and microplastics and all this stuff about, you know, waste going into the environment is a real tragedy, and something that we really ought to be getting on top of. But in my 25 years in construction, I do not feel that we are any further along in waste management than we were when I first started. So, and I find, you know, I feel like that's really a crusade for me, is to try and get to the bottom of why that is, and to try and get people really bought into this subject. Because what now happens, and I think you know my feelings on landfill and incineration, but we've now got to a place in construction site reporting where we report on percentage of waste diverted from landfill. And you know, and you get these projects that say 99% diverted from landfill or 100%, you know, and everyone pats themselves on the back and feels really good about it. But the question that comes out of that is, if it's not going to landfill, where is it going? Because nobody seems to be interested in asking that question. We just have this KPI. The answer to that is it's going to incineration. And, you know, we're not really recycling any more material than we were 20 years ago. What's happening is, instead of just chucking it in a hole in the ground, we're now chucking it into a massive furnace and pouring pollution out into the atmosphere. And when mixed material is incinerated, you end up with about 25% of the mass of that material remains as a hugely toxic ash that then has to be landfilled, or, you know, found some other really downgraded use for it, like road fill, you know, or construction blocks. And that's a real travesty, but we're not shining a spotlight on that. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I'm really keen on designers really thinking about buying products that have recycled content, because in that way we can stimulate the market for recyclate. Because at the moment, you know, it's a really sad situation that it is cheaper, easier, quicker to take oil out of the ground, convert it into virgin plastic, and then make it into packaging that then gets driven, you know, from a warehouse to site, taken off that product and chucked into a skip and then incinerated. It's cheaper to do that than it is to either avoid the plastic altogether, which is the ideal scenario, or to find some way of recycling it. And I think, you know, we need to shine a spotlight on this. It's really crazy that that's the way that our material cycle is set up. So designers have a massive part to play in asking questions of their suppliers, saying, you know, what is your policy on packaging? Because we don't want to be purchasing a product that then leaves us with a massive waste problem with all of this packaging that is made from virgin materials that then just goes in a skip. We have to pay for that to get rid of it. So you're landing us with a problem. So can you, number one, take that problem away from us? And what are you doing to incorporate recycled materials into your products so that when we buy our products, we're not adding to that huge burden of waste that's in this linear, what we call the linear economy, which is that you take the material from natural sources, you manufacture it, and then you bung it in an incinerator. We're trying to get to a place where stuff has a longer life cycle and actually it comes back into useful life. So try and just ask, I would say to all designers, ask your supply chain these questions. What are they doing to minimize waste throughout the life of the product? What are they doing to make sure that their product doesn't become waste? Do they have a take-back scheme? You know, and a massive thing that I've got on my hobby horse about over COVID is there's now this big culture, this knee-jerk reaction on buying lots of disposable stuff. And I think that, you know, one of the things, if you do have to buy stuff that is disposable, you know, if that is part of your policy, if you do have to go down that route, make sure that that is not virgin material that then is just going to get chucked in an incinerator. You know, try and make sure that that stuff has come, is circular, that it has come from recycled product, that it is then taken back by the manufacturer to refurbish or to recycle into another useful product. Otherwise, you're part of the problem. You're just creating tons of waste that has to go somewhere.
No, that's really interesting. If anyone's joined recently and wants to ask any questions, then pop them in. But just further on how we can reuse, recycle, reduce waste is there's actually a massive amount of movement. There's a massive movement towards that, isn't there? And there is a lot, with a bit of digging, you can actually find a lot of products out there. I was just seeing Agilito launching a range of desking made from Smile plastics, which is old yogurt pots. I mean, how cool. I mean, what's not to love? But
I
mean, what a story. Like, it's just so cool. And we did a bit of when we were launching a range of curtains and blinds made from recycled plastics. I did a bit of research as well as to what else is in the industry, so we could collaborate with them. And it's always great to find people doing the same, but for other products. And yeah, the amount that I uncovered in carpets and furniture and materials and like smile plastics and acoustic baffles, and what we found was huge. And there's so much with a bit of digging that you can find, and having those conversations with people and collaborating. Got a blog on our website, 6 ways to design a more sustainable office or something like that, written by Charis Lana, which was really, really well put together. I don't know, have you seen it or not?
No, I haven't. No, I'll go and take a look at it.
Yeah, take a look. Yeah, it's really good. It's just like we had loads of we had loads and loads of feedback from people about reducing recycling and reusing waste, like how their products did it. And we thought this was so blinking wicked. We just wanted to not lose it, just because it would have ended up in comments on a LinkedIn feed, and it's gone in 24 hours, isn't it? So we picked it all out and have created a blog on our website. So yeah, it is, and it's really great. It's like a little index for designers, I guess. And then the other day I was tagged into a post from Agility, as I mentioned, and yeah, gonna pop that in there just because I think it's great to have a bit of a living blog, not just a once launched then forgotten.
Well, and I think that this is the thing, is that the industry's moving on, isn't it? So the information that you put on it is out of date so quickly, so and new stuff's coming up all the time. Yeah, it's really good. And you know, participating in forums. So we've got an agency, so Element 4, which is my company, Element 4 have created this Agents of Change program that we ran throughout June, and as a result of that, we created the Agents of Change group on LinkedIn, and that's for anybody who is interested in becoming more active in sustainability, whatever your job, but you want to ask questions of people in a no judgment space, you know, to be able to just say, what are you doing? I'm thinking about this, I don't understand this topic, can you just signpost me towards some information? So if anyone is interested in just starting out in looking at how to make their role, you know, or their project more sustainable, just hop on the Agents of Change group and just ask your questions there, and we keep on, you know, we keep an eye on it, we answer questions and then encourage people to interact as well and share what they're doing.
Yeah, and a shout out to Kate Sullivan. She's just saying she's enjoying the discussion, but she's heading to a meeting. Do you know Kate, Georgia?
No, I don't. No,
really great. She's really good at sustainability, SCAR, all that stuff. IOR group. Yeah, no, good contact. Worth you chatting afterwards. Okay. But thank you, Kate. Our job is to connect people up and join dots.
Yeah, good.
But no, there's so much that can be done.
I think one of the biggest things that you can do, this is where I always try to kind of drive my clients, is not just thinking about the impact that you've got right now on this project, but using your influence. So we all have an influence, and I call it in my workshops, you know, your spheres of influence. And you as an individual, you know, might have influence within your family, within your group of friends. You might be a mentor to somebody, you know, and you've got your immediate influence. And then beyond that, you've got a professional influence where you are an advisor to clients, where you are a colleague, where you might be a boss, a manager, an advisor. And then above that, you've got your influence as a constituent, you know, with an MP, as a resident, you know, with the councils, as a consumer of brands. And it's really important to think about all three of those spheres and what level of influence you can have, because we're all working within a system, whether we're in a company, in a home, you know, in a society. And there's various different things that we can do to have influence that is bigger than just ourselves. So if you love a particular brand, a particular organization, but they're not operating in a way that's particularly sustainable, then use your influence, you know, contact that organization and say to them, look, I'm a really loyal customer, I love your products, but I'm really disappointed that you're not doing more on whatever it is, on packaging, on recycling, on ethics, you know, on worker human rights or whatever. And just contact them, make it known, you know, just send them a tweet or send them an email or whatever. And your particular comment, you know, you might get a brush off or you might get ignored or whatever, they might respond. But you might be the 20th person that week who has made a similar comment. And that is how we start to have influence on these systems and these organizations that can have a real change, and a bigger change than we necessarily can directly influence within our own lives and our own companies. So as a specifier, you know, you can then start to work longer term with your suppliers who maybe at the moment they're not that sustainable, but that's no reason not to purchase from them. You might have a great influence on them and be able to signpost them to resources and say to them, look, this is really important to us. If we're going to continue being a customer of yours, we want to work with you on developing more sustainable products and, you know, finding great solutions. And then that means that you're bringing up standards in the whole of industry, not just like green stamping your own project and then moving on to the next.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of that, haven't we? Where I think today, more than ever before in the history of time, that an individual influence is so powerful. It can create such a movement. It can create such a change. People have got such a loud voice, haven't they? Every individual has. There's nobody's a non-entity. Nobody's useless, are they? Big
I think
time.
Yeah, definitely taking back individual empowerment. You know, it's where I'm, you know, that I'm an activist with Extinction Rebellion, as well as my, you know, my professional capacity. But I feel like, you know, now is a time when if you care about a topic, there are so many platforms that you can use to really raise that and make your voice heard, because corporates, you know, they're listening. They want your business. They want to get you to buy their products or to engage with them. If you tell them what's important to you, they will shift, you know, and it might be slow, but they will shift over time when they can see this kind of dialogue going on. So if you care about the subject, I think one of the most simple things you can do is just start asking questions.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. So what's the biggest sustainability mistake or mistakes, if you can't pick one, in workplace design? What's a common thing you come across? I threw this in. I knew it was going to be a bit of a difficult one, and I knew we got designers on here listening to us or listening back over in the future. What's something at the moment that's missed?
Oh my goodness. Sustainability mistakes. Crikey. I think, you know, there are things I see happening all the time in workplace design. I think the biggest mistake is not inducting people properly into their new space. That by far and away, I think, is the biggest positive influence that you can have over the life of this building. Creating really, really great building user guides or occupant user guides for how to properly engage with this space. Engaging in a really good change management program with people coming from their old office into their new one, teaching them about the building, you know, because you can, like I said before, you know, you can provide this amazing space that looks really great and it's got loads of sexy gadgets and stuff, but you're still working with fleshy lumps, you know, who come into the space and they don't know how to use it, and they just carry on doing what they were doing before. They just bring in their archive boxes, dump them on a new desk, you know, and you've got all of your good work on providing this incredible sustainable space just is for nothing. So I definitely think that more time needs to be spent on preparing people for the office move, teaching them about new principles within the space, and then inducting them in a really robust way. I think the second thing I would say, again, is about post-occupancy evaluation, is that I think clients and designers are really missing a trick when they just move people into a space and then they don't go back and evaluate the performance of that space, you know, 3 months and a year later, to actually see. And I know we get, like, you know, lots of designers or contractors will say, oh, we've got this, you know, first 100 days, and that's fine, that's good, that's a start. But I think that you're still working out the kinks in that time. And I think what would be so valuable is for clients to specify up front that they require those organisations to go back after a year and to evaluate the performance of the space, to be conducting monitoring, to be really looking at the performance of that space and getting getting the organisations that were involved in the design and the development of that space to come back and to learn from what they installed, and be completely honest about the performance of that space, and see, you know, how have the products performed in the real world. You know, how are they looking now a year on? You know, how is the space operating? Are users using it in the way it was originally intended? Is the performance of the building, like energy, water, light, you know, is it working? And get real on the ground feedback. I think those two things, you know, inducting these fleshy lumps from one building to the next, you know, and get them hitting the ground running and working really well in their new space is number one. Number two is getting real data on how that space is performing, and clients making that routinely part of their specification, that they're not just going to let the team walk away from it, but they want to get information. And I think, you know, for a sustainable organisation that's interested in progressing this debate, I would like to see that contractors, engineers, architects are internally interested and invested in that they want to learn from their designs. They want to be humble and honest about it and go back to it at a later date, and have that formalized process where the client allows them to go back into the space too, because it's not one way. You know, sometimes the client shuts the door and they don't want to be exposed with maybe it's not performing as it should, but setting up that dialogue in the first few meetings and saying, right, we would really like to be allowed to come back in a year's time and conduct these assessments and see how it's performing for our own internal evolution.
And then it goes back to what you're saying at the start anyway. It gives you that whole circle. So what products to specify again, what products to look at in the future, you know, how it's worked there, how it can be used in other spaces, all that type of thing. But I definitely love your first point about inducting people, because communication is such a huge point. I mean, in anything business, so quickly the misinterpretation or some, I mean, in any point much wider than sustainability, just in life, communication is so key, isn't it?
Yeah.
That to change somebody's mind without a training program, or to send someone off, a new starter off into the field without a training program, it's just unheard of. So to put someone into a new space without a training program is just, it's just, we're crazy.
Yeah. Well, and we all see this in offices every day, you know, like, not so much now, but we all know about, you know, you go into a client's meeting room or an organisation's meeting room, and it takes 15 minutes to get the meeting started because nobody knows how to work the AV or the lighting or the blinds, or we just don't, nobody knows. So you waste the first 15-20 minutes of the meeting trying to get the tech working. And it's like that, you know, in every interface of the building. You know, bathroom designs, you end up with these really clever bathroom designs, and people are like, you know, with hand dryers and, you know, hand towels hidden underneath the mirrors, and then people are kind of crawling around trying to look at, you know, where's the damn hand dryer? The design's very clever and it makes sense when the person designs it, but in terms of usability, it just doesn't work, you know. And that's the sort of lessons that's the sort of design that gets repeated again and again, and until you go back into the space and learn the lessons from the users, you're going to keep repeating those mistakes. And we need to understand that people just want to come into a building, they want to know where to sit, they want to just get on with their work, they don't inherently have this knowledge of the building. We have to induct them into it. So just because you've been involved in the project for 2 years doesn't mean that that person will understand how this property works.
Yeah, no, I definitely think a change management training program, if you like, however we want to put it, I think it's a huge point. And not even just on day one either. It can be a rolling thing, and new starters, how are they inducted on the new building? How 3 months down the line, it might be a lot to take in on the first day. What's the second stage of induction? When you start off in a new field of business, you don't ever do one training day, do you? It can be a whole scheme. It can be a development, can't it? And I think there's so much. I think there's so much in communication. I'm a huge sort of advocate for communication internally in our business, and I just think that's such a big deal. I love it that you brought that one up.
Yeah, and having like a buddy, almost like a buddy system as well, whereby people can teach about the culture of the organisation too. So, you know, one great example is where people have gone from one-to-one desking situation, they can then end up being put into an office which is, you know, agile. But what does that mean? How does it work? What's the kind of cultural norms and the behavior that's expected of you, because that can be really intimidating, you know, and people feel safe when they've got a desk, they know where to go, they know how to use it, and it's their space. When you suddenly put people into an agile environment, you know, you don't know whether you can sit there and have a chat or whether you're just going to annoy somebody. Is this a quiet space? Is it noisy? Can I touch down? Can I move around? Can I ask somebody to move if they've been sitting at that desk all day? What are the unspoken rules of this space? You know, and making all of that visible, because otherwise people will always revert to safety. You know, they won't know what the rules of engagement are with the space. And I think that just thinking about making people feel emotionally and culturally comfortable in that space as well, like they know how to engage with it. Yeah, then getting that communication right.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I remember moving over to an agile space herself. It was about 3 years ago, maybe more. But yeah, it was a big deal. It was like before it was planning, it was understanding what spaces we need and what they look like, and trying to look a little bit into the future, because we weren't like that now, but then trying to predict what we would be using, you can imagine.
Yeah,
and then
of course.
on the day that you sort of go agile, if you like, it's not the end of the story. You're only halfway through the journey.
Yeah.
So I remember we had to have like little placards up at each space explaining what it was for and how it could be used, and then the new starters come, and it's about understanding about inducting them, and so everyone's on the same point. We just had a comment come in from Charis Lana saying, what's the coolest sustainability design technology or product you've seen, Georgia? So I'll pass that on to you.
Oh gosh, right. Yeah, so
thank you for your question, Charis. That's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there are so many cool things that come out, you know, and I think, well, I got quite excited about your clients. I mean, we're on topic. This is a Stansons presentation.
I was sitting there like this, like.
I really, you know, I'm quite skeptical when somebody sends me information about their new green product. You know, immediately I'm sort of like, okay, let's have a look at this. And you know, I'm so used to being a bit disappointed with going, oh, okay, you know, that's not that great. And when I found out about your ocean plastics for your product, I was immediately skeptical and thought, oh god, you know, here we go. But I love it. I love it. You know, I think it's really cool. I think that the fact that you're able to produce it for a low price, that it's not this niche product, that it's competitive, you know, compared to all of your other products, that it's made from recycled ocean plastic. So, you know, one of the things about recycled, you know, that often gets greenwashed is quite often when something is, I mean, you see the tag recyclable, which is one that just makes me scream, because everything in theory is recyclable. But if there's no economy set up to make it recycled, you know, to actually take it back and reuse it and recycle it, then it's just meaningless. And when you say recycled, very often people will say, oh, it's 100% recycled. And what they mean is that it's just made from the offcuts of the manufacturing process. So it's basically just like a cost-cutting exercise of product inside their own manufacturing process. But to see yours, which is post-consumer, and it's taking pollution out of the environment and utilising it in a product, I think is really great. And, you know, the recycled story, if people are saying recycled, then we want to see that it is 100% recycled, that it's made out of a post-consumer product, and ideally something that otherwise would have potentially become a pollutant in the environment. So I really like that, and I think that is a really cool story, and so that product is great. Also, you know, I got I saw the same message as you this week. I mean, Smile Plastics, I love them. I think they've got a great story as well. You know, I've been aware of them and using their products for a long time, and I think they've got a great set of products that are made again from post-consumer plastics. And plastics is a massive problem. You know, it's really good to support organisations that are recycling plastics, because most plastics are designed to last 1,000 years, and yet they are only in our possession for moments a lot of the time. So trying to buy post-consumer recycled products is definitely where it's at. So yeah, and one of the things I love about Smart Plastics is that they make a real feature out of the fact that they're post-consumer as well. They don't try and hide it. They actually make that one of the really great things. So you could have it as a really lovely architectural finish and nobody would know. But some of their products you can buy that have little traces of barcode still in them, or little traces of foil from packaging, you know, and they actually make that a unique feature, which I really like. And then there are loads of other really cool things, like Demand Logic is a product that nobody knows about. That is super cool and super geeky, and it's about energy consumption in your buildings. It's about, you know, it's a system that plugs into your BMS, and it identifies all of the conflicts and all of the broken down data points in your whole air handling and lighting system, and it highlights where potentially you've got conflicts, where maybe something's broken, or you've got heating and cooling on at the same time, or maybe the BMS is programmed wrong and so you're cooling your office when nobody's in it. And we've seen across projects that I've been working on that installing a system like that can massively reduce your energy consumption in your building. And that's something about looking at how your building's actually performing in practice and reducing consumption. So I love that. And it's a product that is all about post-occupancy evaluation, and it's not very sexy, you know, it's not like a lovely thing you can kind of stroke and go, oh, doesn't it look gorgeous? But to a super geek like me on environment and sustainability, that is the kind of thing I get really excited about.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I'm glad. Thank you very much for the question, Terrace. That's really brought out some great points, I think. Has anyone else got any questions? We'd love to hear them. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
At the least. Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's such an exciting topic because we're such at the start of a curve in a way of so much change, aren't we? Like there's more and more projects that we're coming on, and people that I'm talking to, I'm now just saying, look, instead of looking at standard, can we switch it over to a sustainable product? And so often people are like, yes, actually that would be interesting. And they just hadn't, it is a sustainable product, but they might be looking at the bigger picture. They might not be looking at something as small as curtains and blinds, acoustics. But when you mention it, they're like, actually that does plug in nicely. So it is something we're hearing about. It's just we need to keep the cost down. So it's affordable. That's my big thing.
Yeah, and I think that is a real travesty at the moment, that so many sustainable products are really expensive, and that turns people off. And to me, that is not sustainable. You know, the principle of sustainability is that something has to be environmentally and socially sustainable, but also financially sustainable. And if you're paying 10 times the price for something, that is not financially sustainable, and so it cannot be a long-term part of the solution. So I'm really excited when I find products that have sort of cost parity, and with something that is, you know, made of virgin materials, or, you know, is made in a sweatshop versus something that is made in a really well managed ethical environment. You know, finding products that can compete in certain parameters. But I think as well the problem that we've had is that products are artificially priced, because they, you know, usually if you find something that's a bargain basement price, the reason is that somewhere along the line it has abused the environment, it's abused human rights. You know, nothing is cheap without having a kind of knock-on impact somewhere in its life. So I think if you find something that is a bargain, you've got to ask yourself why, because it can't be a bargain if it's been ethically produced, ethically sourced, you know, and is a long-term sustainable product. That's very different from having something that is a normal price, a standard price for a product, as compared to some of these sustainable products, which are like 2 or 3 times the price and just end up being ridiculous. You know, and I think that takes a little bit of investigation about why are these products, is it profiteering? And one of the things, you know, a friend of mine in the industry, we were looking recently, pre-lockdown, to go for like a spa day. You know, we really wanted to go to a spa. We wanted to go somewhere that was a little bit ethical. And we found this kind of eco spa that we were going to go to. But the price of it was just mental, you know, and we were like, why? There's nothing about it other than being an eco spa, you know, and it just drove me mad, because I was like, sometimes I feel like if you put the term eco or sustainable onto a product, it justifies bumping up the cost without actually having much about it that justifies that. So
Yeah.
I think it's always worth interrogating this, and I think as time goes on and more products come into the market, we will get to a point where maybe the prices start to normalize, you get efficiencies of scale, and these products that were niche start to become, you know, more
Normal.
Yeah, more normally priced.
Yeah, I think it is a double-edged sword, if you like. There's one that there's people out there unethically producing products that can be so cheap, and there's also people that are producing ethically products, but because they've got eco and they put green on the logo instead of yellow,
Yeah.
suddenly like twice the price, which is wrong. It should be available to everybody, and not just specialist niche companies. But I think we're nearly out on time. If there's any last minute questions that want to come in, but Georgia, thank you very, very much for your time. It's smashing. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. No, thank you.
It's been brilliant. I think I live nowhere now, so I've learnt tons. It's really interesting. And it's something that I don't want this conversation to be the end of it either. I want keep following Stansons Group. We're big on LinkedIn. Keep following Element 4. What are your big platforms, Georgia?
So Element 4 on LinkedIn, also, you know, my personal LinkedIn. To be honest, that's pretty much it. We've got a channel on YouTube with all of our webinars and all of our training courses and things that we do. So Element 4 on YouTube, on LinkedIn. I do have an Instagram and a Twitter account, but I never use it, so there's no point trying to reach to me on those. So yeah, LinkedIn, that's basically where I hang out most of the time.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I'm a big LinkedIn fan personally, and Stansons Group, and we have got an Instagram as well, which we're trying to rev up a bit. So yeah, anyone that wants to join in, you can keep up with the noise. Cool. Excellent, Georgia. Well, thank you.
No, my
very
pleasure.
much. Excellent. Should we clock off now?